Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Power and Purpose Life, the discussion series from the New Energy Advancement Hub, organized together with the Worshipful Company of Fuelers. My name is Tatiana Mitrova, and I'm joined by my co-moderator, whom I think you all know, Krutika Bala. And today we are putting one of the most debated technology of our time under the lens. We are talking about CCUS, between the headlines, the hopes, and the hard numbers. Over the past week, I've seen a really intense debate online on LinkedIn. Some people say CCUS is proven. Look at Sleipner, Quest, Gorgon, and the other projects. The other insist it's too costly, too small, too late, and thermodynamically not justified. So, what's the truth? Where do the real numbers lead us? We are joined by two outstanding guests who will bring financial, technical, and strategic insights to the topic. And I will ask them to turn on their cameras and to join us. So I'm really very glad to introduce Mohammed Hassan, Principal Project Manager at Carbon Direct, and Ashutosh Shastri, Distinguished Fellow at Brink and Director at Enerstrad Consulting. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. Krutika, over to
Thank
you.
thank you, Tatiana, and welcome to all of our participants joining online. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kritika Anastasia. It's a pleasure to welcome you with the incomparable Tatiana together with me for this exciting and interesting conversation. A quick reminder, please post your questions in the LinkedIn chat and we'll bring them along into the conversation as we go. We want this session to be as interactive and engaging as possible. It's not us having a monologue and talking amongst ourselves, but really have the opportunity to fully engage with our audience today. So please don't forget to post those questions on LinkedIn. But we're here to look at what's working and what isn't in a bit more candid way, but also realistic, balanced, and measured process. So perhaps let me start with the basics. After decades of pilots, is CCUS finally scaling? Today we have around 77 operational projects that's capturing roughly 64 million tons of CO2 per year. However, only about, I should say, 0.15% of global emissions. Um, um, and this is a very small proportion. So, Yash, I want to come to you first. So, from your market perspective, does this look like meaningful progress or just early foundations of something bigger that we're yet to see? Where do you think is the real applicable market niche for CCUS?
Well, thank you, Kritika. Great to have you. Great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity for the Fearless Company to also be represented. I'm really grateful, Tatiana. Uh, to answer your question, if you posit this question as the overarching CCUS contribution, and if you, in a very crude way, look at CCUS as a one big black box, then the answer seems not at scale. But if you really look a little bit closely, then there are parts of the ecosystem within the energy sector where CCUS is mature, proven. There is a number of commercial projects, and people in the gas industry, particularly in the oil and gas industry, where upstream gas gathering platforms have high concentrations of CO2, they would tell you that, what's such a big deal about it? We have been capturing carbon and re-injecting it into our fields and improving our hydrocarbon exploration potential by 15% year on year. So there are those parts that are at scale, that are commercial, and that have been going on even when there was not a carbon market in place. So I would kind of posit that question saying, yes, at a high level, 0.15% doesn't give an indication of scale. Uh, but I think it is still very early days, and as this conversation progresses, I think we will move to the areas of the hard to abate system. I come from a school of thought that if you are talking about net zero, strictly speaking, then there is no way you can escape CCUS. So if net zero is true, then CCUS has to be true. If CCUS is the if you come with a school of thought that all CCUS is you know just talk, then you have to come to the conclusion that so is net zero, and that cannot be the answer. So the answer is somewhere in between.
Thank
Ashutosh,
you,
I
Ash.
have a follow-up question here. In management, uh, you always need to measure your progress. Something that is not measured is not managed. Yeah. So here, if we are talking about some real progress in CCUS, how should we measure it? In tons captured or cost per ton or investment flows or like policy durability? What is the right metric?
I would say all of the above. They're all valid metrics indeed. And so let's look at some numbers and some of these in details. Let's say for the UK, so 21 billion of investment have been announced for the first FID, for the first track one clusters. And that actually attracted a commitment of 8 billion pounds of private investments. So we started to see fruit here, bearing fruit here in terms of the stability of their business models. In terms of numbers, we other numbers as well. We see that the same thing happened in Northern Light, where the public subsidy had been combined with private investment. So they managed to attract 1 billion euros just for this particular project. Other metrics like how much is actually being captured on the ground. We see the most recent announcement from Northern Light that starting from August, they're actually capturing successfully and continuously, storing continuously 1 ton of CO2 per minute. That's amazing and remarkable. And I think it addressed the question about the technology maturity, the financial viability, and also what could be achieved with CCUS over over the current decade.
Yeah, indeed, 1 billion ton,
One ton, one ton per
1
minute.
ton per minute. So it's 60 tons in 1 hour. Okay. Yeah.
So I would say, Tatiana, I would respond to your question by saying that the investment, the tons of carbon perhaps takes precedence, but the tons of carbon connected with the investment cost and the FID related areas actually gives you a good, framework to kind of say which parts of the ecosystem you have a bigger bang for the buck, as it were, in terms. And so if you think about, I agree with Mohammed that if you start to look at these metrics in isolation, that might give you a very different set of answers. But if you are to build scalability in this business, then you have to think about these as a integrated set of metrics. And that integrated set of metrics would actually give you the framework to say, well, actually, coal-fired power generation with its low concentration of CO2 stream perhaps is not the right subsection or a application market. Now, if you go by the metric of just the intensity of carbon, then the answer would be that of course we have to address the most carbon intensive part of the system, and that would be the coal-fired power generation. And therefore, we should focus all our early investments on coal-fired power generation. I think some of that happened in the early years, when 2005, 2007, the first wave of CCUS came up. And I think those lessons perhaps have been most, you know, what is the word? Most severely learnt in the United Kingdom, where we are almost at we've been third time lucky to kind of get a couple of few projects off the ground, but more importantly, the commercial and the financial investment framework, which combines public investment and private investment together in the FID decisions.
So if we address all this criticism that I saw on LinkedIn, where people were really challenging the idea of massive scale up of CCUS, arguing that there are much better and cheaper solutions related to like solar, wind, and so on. So how would you both formulate these really target, so not the whole addressable market, but the target market for CCUS? Because it looks like it's like the decision of the last resort. When nothing else can help to decarbonize, you come to CCUS, which is indeed quite complex and it doesn't work everywhere. It needs certain specific conditions in this exactly location. Yeah, but what are these conditions? What indeed is the target market? Who is ready to start first?
Absolutely. I mean, we shouldn't be thinking of CCUS as the silver bullet that will go and solve all the climate issues. It is part of the solution, but it is a fundamental part of the solution as well. A thing that jumped to mind about the viability of CCUS for particular application is obviously the availability of the stores that are suitable for storage and their sufficient capacity. All the studies that have been conducted demonstrate that actually there is a lot of stores that are actually suitable to store huge volumes of CO2. The second element is the transport, either by shipping or either by pipelines. So accessibility for shipping, so accessibility to deep waters is quite fundamental, especially if you want to achieve economies of scale. The length of the pipelines also is fundamental as well. Some industries, you will be able to decarbonize it without the need for CCUS by using just electricity. For others, it's extremely difficult to find any meaningful solution for decarbonization or to achieve this deep decarbonization of these industries without CCUS. So CCUS is part of the mixture and it should be considered, and we should be pursuing all the viable options that have been given to us either by nature or by technology in order to achieve our common goal of reducing the climate change impact.
Right. And
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So one question I had for both of you is I do understand it. Just want to sort of try and bring a slightly different perspective in terms of pushing your ability to answer these questions as well, as much as Tatiana and I are deeply invested in using this opportunity to update ourselves about what's going on in the market as well. High interest rates and the technology, from a technological point of view, a lot of it is proven in an industrial setting, but the high industry rate, the transportation cost, how do you see cohabitation point of view? Those sort of trends that you're looking at, and how? Because there was a talk about cohabitation some months ago, and I can't see that in the public domain anymore. Is there still a viable opportunity that we're still talking about? Because I think that will drastically bring the overall project value as well to reasonable levels.
Absolutely, and that's absolutely correct. And this is all about the thinking behind the cluster initiatives, or the hubs, as it's been called in some of the other regions across the world. Having this shared infrastructure would reduce dramatically the overall cost, because the cost gets shared between multiple emitters. So multiple emitters are using the backbone of one transport and storage network. That will reduce the unit cost for transport and storage drastically for all the emitters that get connected to this network. Also, there are other initiatives that could help to achieve this. For example, people are thinking about having centralized units for the conditioning of the flue gases. Also, shared compression facilities. All these aspects reduce drastically the overall cost of the transport and storage and deliver a much better value. for money and obviously much less subsidy reliance as well. And this was the approach that had been followed mainly in the UK. It's been followed as well in a lot of the European countries, and hopefully we will be seeing lots of these stemming across the USA as well. And it's a global trend. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if Ash has any thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, a large part of that answer lies in how CCS became CCUS. And sometimes we forget that the whole cluster approach also came from that, saying, do you do you have to capture, do you have to sequester everything that you capture, or can you use some of it? So that is where that approach came in. The second important dimension relating to the high interest cost that you mentioned was in the early phase, particularly 2005 onwards, when this whole thing started. I mean, my practice wrote its first position paper on CCUS clusters in 2006. It barely got a press release somewhere, and got a couple of mentions in the press, but it largely died its own death. Because there was, that thinking was, probably there, but the mechanics of how to make it work wasn't there. Importantly, I think at that time, the sovereign risk related to the storage, or the guarantees associated with the integrity of the storage system, they were not available. The knowledge about the knowledge to the insurance sector, for example, from the oil and gas sector, about the integrity of the carbon fields, or where the sequestration was to take place, was not very convincing. How, therefore, this risk would be handled was not clear. That risk not being clear, the cost of capital was very high. And I think the clue, or the real trigger really came when people stopped thinking about CCS as an integrated system, but saying, there's a capture value chain of the element, there's a utilization value chain of the element, there is transportation and storage. And then you saw that, part of the risk being taken over by utilization. So not all captured carbon was going to be, processed, transported, and stored. Some of it was to be utilized. Some of it was to be used for common carriage. Then, the national grid started to think about, the pipelines it could allocate for the transportation of the CO2. The parliamentary committee actually made a report on the storage or the transportation costs of CO2. And I remember at the time that that costings for CCUS transportation and storage came lower than the strike price for Hinkley Point C, which was 92.5 pounds per megawatt hour. So, so even before, things started to move on in terms of, concrete in the ground, or, construction in the ground, there was that confidence that was set up, and that confidence took some time to build up. So I would kind of answer that question saying, now you have the individual elements of the CCUS ecosystem are better known. There is better insight around transportation. There is better insight around what is the break-even distance, or what is the maximum possible distance for pipelines to make this viable. So much of that knowledge now is widely held, widely shared, and that has played a role in relative de-risking of the CCUS ecosystem. That's how I would respond.
I would also add that I totally agree. Also, the risk allocation between the government and the different entities across the whole of the value chain have reduced the cost of capital a lot for the projects that have been backed by the business models in the UK as a clear example for this. So all this combination in terms of the risk allocation between the relevant parties involved in the investment made this particular project successful and commercially viable and bankable as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen these massive FIDs.
Mm-hmm. So, Mohammed, I wanted to ask exactly on this matter. So, with these risk-sharing models, yeah, if you compare like UK, US model or Middle Eastern models, which one seems to be most efficient and really de-risking investment at the moment?
Absolutely, and without being biased, because I was involved in the design of the business models, obviously in the UK, but we at Carbon Direct actually done an analysis of all the different business models across the globe, with a particular focus in Europe and the UK, and the UK wins hands down in terms of the risk allocation because it provide this very long-term certainty. It underwrites a lot of the long liability risk related to the stores and so on. So, for on the metal side, particularly on the power sector, it's been structured very carefully in terms of the variable payment and the availability payment. With the variable payment, actually protects the energy producer, the power producer, from the fluctuation that will be exposed to from deploying the CCUS technology. So overall, the best risk allocation across all the different models comes from the UK. I believe it presents the blueprint that can be deployed elsewhere across the globe. And we're actually seeing a lot of countries actually looking at the UK and how they manage to structure this risk allocation. A great example that jumps to mind, actually Japan, when they're thinking about the emerging business models, they look at the UK and they look how the UK have structured the business model, and they will use it as the template to produce their own business model to deploy CCS at scale in Japan.
Fantastic. Thank you. Kritika, you
Excellent.
wanted to ask? Yes.
Ash, one of the sharpest criticisms we've heard online is that CCUS is a distraction pushed by incumbents. How? I feel like we constantly fall into this polarization trap a little bit. So I'm trying to understand how we can ensure that it complements, not competes with renewable and efficiency pathways and so on. What thoughts have you got to offer on this?
If I can go first, then
Yeah.
Sure.
one of the first things I would say is that the technology associated with CCUS and its success is actually largely related to the CO2 concentration. And if you think from a CO2 concentration and your capture efficiency is going to be determined, for example, by the amount of concentration of CO2 you have. From that perspective, coal-fired power generation does not become the first candidate to be the recipient of a CCUS, benefit. But that is what has happened because if you go from a single metric of the biggest pollutant so far, then that would have to be the coal-fired power station, and therefore a lot of that attention was given to the coal-fired power station, and therefore it was very easy to say that, oh, it is the incumbents who are trying to kind of sustain their business model. I will just humbly submit that what we are seeing in terms of the the availability of rotating equipment on the power system today, and the provision of inertia, I would say you need a certain amount of inertia on the system. You need a certain amount of, just to look at the power sector, because that is where most of the criticism has come. You need a certain amount of inertia, and therefore you need a certain amount of fossil fuel plant on the system. It does not matter as far as the industry is concerned whether that is a coal-fired plant or a gas-fired plant. If you think from a CCUS perspective, the concentration of carbon streams available in the gas side, you would dictate that gas is actually a better candidate for CCUS than coal. Now, this debate also did not capture the reason why there was little uptake from the coal-fired power plants for CCUS. It was not just the concentration argument. The argument also was that typical subcritical thermal power plants would operate at an electrical efficiency of 32 to 35%. These are typically older plants. If you have a bolt-on capture technology on top of it, you pay what is called an efficiency penalty. And that efficiency penalty would be in the range of about 15%. And therefore, to run a coal-fired plant at 15% efficiency, trying to do something which is not quite well proven, seemed like a large, far-fetched argument. Compared to the concentration in a gas-fired power station is very different. The thermal operating efficiency or the electrical efficiency of a gas-powered power system is very different, and therefore the carbon price associated with and the efficiency associated with would suggest that there will be a better uptake for CCUS within the gas sector. So this is in the existing asset portfolio or existing asset base. Now, if you look at China or some of the emerging countries, then the new coal-fired plants that are coming up, what is being missed is that these are ultra supercritical power plants. The ultra supercritical power plants have a thermal efficiency of close to 48-49%, right? I mean, all the way, at the very edge of the first law of thermodynamics. Now, there, if you take a efficiency penalty of 15%, you still get a 32-35% electrical efficiency, but that is net zero. That the carbon footprint of that asset is zero. Now, what is the value of such an asset to the reliability and the ramp rate of a power system when it comes to that? So I would frame the debate rather differently, saying that this is not, and to that extent, even the fossil fuel or the coal-fired power station owners themselves have not been able to make that argument very cogently because it was still a very evolving space. The argument is that there is already a very severe opposition on the grounds of social license to operate for new coal-fired power stations. So for anyone to defend, new coal-fired power station, but not subcritical, but ultra supercritical, is a fatuous argument. It's an argument that will take a long time to kind of get the confidence from the investment community. Now, to add a relatively unproven CCUS element on top of a ultra supercritical plant technology where the asset established base is pretty low, the cost of capital would still be high. The social license to operate for such a project would still be high. So these are actually the genuine problems that the electricity sector has actually faced, and I would be honest to say they have not been able to communicate that value proposition very effectively either. I mean, it's a narrative war, and how much can you get across the line is also an important consideration.
Well, very well explained, Ash. I think one of the things is that the cost structure is stubbornly high, but there's also a learning curve as well that comes along with it. And I'm really liking your balanced answer around it, because surely it's easy to get sucked into this vortex of one way or the other. But it still, to me personally, it still doesn't explain what does it take for CCUS to be successful, let alone, barring the rest of the argument. So thank you for explaining that in such a nuanced and detailed way. I turn this over to Tatiana. I wonder if she has any questions around these areas. Tatiana?
Thank you, Kritika. Well, my main question to both of you would be from the economic perspective. We've discussed policy, and it seems that there is already at least a good blueprint to follow. There are already lessons learned. So with the policy, it's okay. With the economics, in order to make it real bankable business case. So I hear very contradictory messages. Some people are saying it is already flying without any heavy subsidy. It's making financial sense. The others are saying, no, it's completely unprofitable business at the moment. So first of all, you are dealing with many projects on the ground. How would you characterize the current financial economic attractiveness of CCUS as a business?
Absolutely. To say that it doesn't need subsidy at the moment or wouldn't rely on subsidy, that wouldn't be true. Subsidy is needed at the moment, but we always look at it on the long-term trajectory. So the cost curve, definitely the cost will go down as more projects get deployed, as we expand on the supply chain, as more projects get replicated and get built. This all will drive the cost trajectory down. Hence, the reliance on subsidy will start to gradually decrease. And this was the intention also behind the design of all the current business models. They don't rely, it's not like forever, it's going to be reliant on subsidies to prop this project or prop the technology. It's relying on gradual decrease in these subsidy levels to make this project actually be built through the pure merchant route. And I believe this is achievable maybe within the next 5 to 10 years. The problem will be if we stop the momentum, because that will mean that the cost will start to increase again, and will not be achieving the efficiencies or the cost reductions from replication and continuing doing this project again and again and again. So this is the key aspect that needs to be considered. Also, there is a lot of great advancement in technology. So Ash mentioned, for example, the parasitic loading and so, and how that might affect the attractiveness of some of the power plants. The new solvents actually do solve some of these problems. There is the new technologies about the integration that could cut significantly the energy penalty. There are other elements as well that reduce the degradation rate of the solvent that are being used. And all this advancement in technology will bring the cost even further down. Uh, but we need to keep the momentum. Now we have all the right pillars in place. So we have the policies are in place, the regulatory frameworks are in place. We have some attraction of private capital as well into these projects. So as long as we continue this momentum, then definitely the cost will come down, and people would need to look at what happened in the wind industry, in the solar industry, and the same trajectory will be followed in CCUS. It's not any different than all these different technologies when they started to get deployed with heavy subsidy, that they started to rely less and less on subsidies. Also, one other element that is quite important, and Ash touched on it, is the multiple revenue streams, or the revenue stacks that come into the buildup of these projects. In terms, some of the CO2 could be used for fuels, and could be used can be generate some kind of an additional revenue stream that reduces also the reliance on the amounts of subsidy that is needed. Despite the slow pace of the U, we call it the silent U in CCUS, but it's starting to make a lot of sound at the moment, and more we see more utilization aspects that could help also with the financial viability of these projects.
Yeah,
I have one follow-up question.
Tatiana. Yeah,
Please
I'll
go ahead,
add to
Ash.
that. Yeah, I'll add to that question by saying that, where does it make money, or where does it make sense? I would say in global application markets. So, for example, cement, in the hard to abate sector, you have steel manufacturing, you have metals and metallurgical industries, cement manufacturing. Now, one of what might surprise you is, a place like India does not have any kind of, supporting policy environment right now for CCUS, much as they would like to have it. We did a recent study which found that there are 10 different government institutions that have some sort of a mandate for CCUS, and how you are going to craft a policy through 10 different government institutions is a challenge. But yet at the same time, some of the least cost producers of cement in the world, who happen to be in India, have actually successfully deployed carbon capture and sequestration in India at exactly. And so why is it that they're doing? Because necessity is a mother of invention, and they have the opportunity to, they took that chance. Now, the answer really is that, if you now think about the applicability for uh, the global cement sector, then there are like three or four. Heidelberg Cements is one of them. There are three or four large companies who have actually deployed that. Now, the moment you have a global industry like cement manufacturing with a few breakout leaders kind of taking that plunge, you are likely to see that innovation. You are likely to see a very realistic, learning rate, which is quite rapid. So that has been an evidence. So the other area, of course, very well established is gas processing. Now, gas processing gives you a lot more concentrated flow streams to work with, and therefore the economics works. But these, I would say, these individual small elements of the project are something where they have the global application potential. Something like cement manufacturing is globally applicable. So the learning rates in some of these niche areas would be higher than the overall learning rates in CCUS technology, for example, right? So that is one. The second advantage is that, it was mentioned cohabitation or co-location. Now, if you think about the design of the UK tier one projects, let's say look at the Teesside and the Humber project, right? 21 billion of investment, 27 million tons of CO2 capture by mid 2035, 28 different projects. Now, therefore, they are now combining the compression, as you say, or they're combining the capture element of that you say. So now that you are no longer thinking about CCUS from a technology window of carbon, of cement or power generation. You are taking a combination of industries. Essentially, what you're doing is you're going back to the old industrial sectors in the UK where the existing infrastructure and the ecosystem was in place, and that ecosystem renewal, I think, is where the again, the early commercial success would be visible. So I would say application markets which have global potential, such as cement manufacturing, steel manufacturing, um, fertilizer industries, process industries, biomethane. I mean, the European Biogas Association has come out with a phenomenal figure of, they at the moment it is capturing somewhere around 5 to 7 million tons of carbon dioxide, but on its existing base, just by deploying available CCUS technologies, you can scale that up by 6x to 30 to 32 million tons of CO2 in Europe alone. So there are these niche elements, areas where that application potential or the scale up is very real, and it's happening, at this levels of carbon price.
Right. So I think what I hear from both of you, Mo and Ash, is there are specific, despite sobering overall economics, there are specific niche applications that will and likely to achieve competitiveness. Things like high purity CO2 sources like ethanol and natural gas processing, ammonia production, they can all achieve carbon capture costs below, I suppose, $40 per ton, for example. Or EOR is an
Lower.
opportunity to, yeah, and enhance oil recovery also provides direct revenue streams as well. But again, that pathway has a bit of a sustainability challenge because it enables more additional fossil fuel extraction and so on. So I agree with you very much on the point on the hard to abate sectors. I think the UK's National Wealth Fund allocation is a fantastic example. So thank you for taking us and providing those details. Then one thing I do want to mention is I don't know if Tatiana has any more around the economics and the policy of it, but I was thinking that perhaps it's, we understand that this is not a silver bullet, or sounds very cliche, but yes, let's call it a silver bullet for the sake of the arguments and be relatable. It's still a very critical tool,
Absolutely.
and we need to have multiple options. We need to have all of the above, so to speak, especially for the hard to abate sectors. So perhaps, if it's all right with Tatiana and Mo and Ash, we can turn to the technology and the physical bottlenecks that is essentially defining the future of CCUS. Shall we go ahead and talk about technology and the physical bottlenecks? Or is there
Yeah,
anything else that you'd like to add on economics and policy?
so technology, infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of skepticism expressed regarding capture technologies.
Yeah.
So where are we today? And is it still so difficult and expensive as it used to be, let's say, a decade ago? Or is there any significant progress?
Absolutely,
Well,
there is significant progress. If we have like 60 operational CCUS plants across the globe, operating reliably, most of them are operating reliably. That's actually deter any argument about the technology not working. If we're having a great project like Northern Light, managing to capture all the CO2 since August and reliably and continuously and cross-border as well. That's a massive achievement that will defy any argument against that the technology is not working or not commercially viable or. I think we already passed this claims by having this very viable and operational project across the globe, really. Particular sectors might be more challenging than others, as we mentioned, related to the concentration of CO2 in the flue stacks, for an example, the energy penalty. But all these things, we are not hiding our heads in the sand. There have been advancements to overcome all these issues as well. There is also issues about the integration with existing facilities. Obviously, if you're having a green field, it's much easier to incorporate. But if you're having a brown field and you're retrofitting, then you have the space constraints. But we've seen modular designs that actually could be fit in a very small space. We see in recycling of the flow stack that could increase the CO2 concentration. We see reuse of the heat, the wasted heat, that actually could reduce the duty for the turbines, the turbines duty. So all this combination, of course, the advancement in the solvents and other options for capture that I mentioned. So all this combination between the technology advancements that are not just at pilot stage, are actually being implemented in projects that are currently operational, should give anybody the sufficient confidence that the trajectory is upward and it's time for the scale up.
excellent. So then the next question is absolutely logical. What scale of scale up do you expect? Yeah, if we are looking for the next 5 years, yeah, not by 2050, it's too far away, but
Yes.
until the end of this decade, what do you expect realistically, keeping in mind that on the ground, you've always, with any project, you face some unexpected obstacles and it never goes as smoothly as people hope. Yeah, but yeah, more or less realistic assessment of the scale of this technology and of course the critical drivers, yeah, the triggers that would either support and promote this development or slow it down significantly.
If I can go first, then I think the biomethane area and the biogas area is, in my view, the most overlooked area in the space. We've got all captured by coal, gas, but there is a lot going on within the European biomethanation industry. Now, what we've done is we have started to very successfully trial, commingling of biomethane within natural gas systems. Now, that ability to kind of commingle for gas transportation means that there is an even greater potential for the what is called the water gas shift equation based industries, for lack of a better word, right? So you will have some of these technologies actually coming through, and they are there. So the scale up, I think, would happen quite counterintuitively, not in the coal side of things, but actually in the biogas and gas side of things, which is very interesting. Second, if you look at it, the particularly the East Coast project in Teesside, Humber, for example, or the HyNet project, the regional local projects that you're beginning to see an integration with hydrogen economy as well. So what CCUS, so with a gas CCUS and hydrogen, you're creating a ecosystem, at least within the region, that is able to capture those technologies. The third area, which I mean, it's just, it's something that we have started to do some work in, very encouraging results. But all the research that has gone on in the CCUS, particularly the capture side of things, the various testing of the various amines, the various combinations, that now lends itself to fast experimentation, fast failure using AI, to saying what combination of amines or what combination of solvents can actually be more relevant for what application market, for what concentration stream. So, it will, I think, drive, you know, uh, the scale up will go, in specific areas of the ecosystem. It will not be at a very meta level of coal or gas or biomass. It will happen in, in cement manufacturing, flue streams, this concentration. For this concentration, this combination of solvents or this combination of amines would work better. Now that insight will probably start to come through faster because of all the R&D that has gone on for the last 10, 15 years in this space, which has been substantial. So I do see a value potential in the monetization of this R&D at some point in time.
Right. In a similar vein, I'm more inclined. I think it also links to one of the questions that we have as well. So I think my question was around. So I'm going to combine the audience question. Thank you, Widad, for that question. And just a reminder for our audience, please feel free to post your questions on chat, and we will get to them. So this one that Widad sent also incidentally marries some of the things I wanted to ask you. So when you think about a comparison of CCUS momentum in the market economics across the various regions in the US and Europe, Asia Pacific, UK. Is the momentum for CCUS and storage and deployment similar in Europe and Asia as it is in the US? Are we moving toward a distinctly regional CCUS market with different economic drivers and infrastructure models? And then the question that we did asked is there a competitive UK carbon capture market in place compared to US or other countries? So again, talk about the momentum a little bit and do some sort of comparative views, if you could share with us between the UK, US, Europe, and Asia Pacific, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. In the UK, it's a very long-term plan, and this actually provides this stability that allow the investment and long-term vision. This long-term vision allows a lot of stability. I mean, so it's not only the 21 billion pounds that had been announced with the track one, it was topped up by the 9 billion that are announced most recently by the councillor in the UK. And also the vision have been communicated in terms of the expansion of the existing clusters and the announcement for track 2 as well. So all this continuity that will keep the momentum. It provides stability. It provides stability in terms of the policy direction, which will enable the deployment of more projects and actually enable also the attraction of more private capital into these projects. In the different European countries have actually followed different models. For example, the Norwegian model, it's based on mutually commercial agreements between the government and the different parties of the value chain. In Europe in general, it relies more or less on an equivalent of a CFD type of contracting as well. So all in all, and I need to emphasize that all this regime provide like long-term stability. So some of the terms of the contract or the tenure of this contract is for 15 years or 10 years, which will provide this revenue stability over a long period of time, which is essential for this type of project and things. In the US, despite all the political debates in the US, but let's step back from all the noise and see what happened to the 45Q. It's largely remain intact. The only thing that had changed is putting in parity the EOR tax incentive to put it on par with other aspects. If we put the dust aside, even in the US, still the incentives are there and there are long-term incentives as well. And also we're starting to see in countries, other countries, like for example, I mentioned Japan, are developing their own business models as well. Even in the Middle East, because we heavily involved in the sector, obviously, so we get calls from oil and gas majors in the Middle East asking us about how to commercialize CO2, how to best build the revenue stack for the project that they intend to build there. So there is a huge momentum even in players that you wouldn't think that they would be very interested in doing CCUS, at least in the short term. But all these dynamics are starting to change now. And I think this will even become more important for countries in the Middle East, especially when things like CBAM comes into force. Because it will attempt to create this level playing field that you will not be able basically sell your products unless they come with a low carbon intensity. So all these dynamics plays into the favor of CCUS in general. Another aspect that actually I would like to mention, that people always think about, the green premium and how that add to the overall cost of the final product. So let's take cement as an example. The overall, so let's say that I'm having a building. So if I'm building it with green cement versus traditional cement, the cost increment, the cost differential will be 1%, 1 to 2%. That's the difference between using green cement and traditional cement. I think it's a cost worth paying to achieve our climate goals. And also, let's talk a little bit about AI and the boom of AI and so on. So, if we look at the other all the different options, so what a data center need? It needs firm load, continuous load, 24/7 with high stability. It needs this massive amount of energy that is going to be used, and it's not only my figure; it's the IEA figures say it's going to be 1,000 terawatt hour by 2026. So, what are the technologies that could meet this demand? Renewable, well, sometimes the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. Would it be nuclear? Well, we have the very long duration that required for the nuclear power plant to be built, either at small scale or a big scale. There is laws of regulatory barrier, and also there is the political condition in some of the region that will not allow the deployment of nuclear technology at these particular regions. So the only solution that we see viable really to meet this immediate huge demand is gas plus CCS. Otherwise, we will not be able to meet the demand from the hyperscalers and this technology. And this actually reflected on all the announcements that have been made recently by the giant tech companies, most recently by Google, in terms of broad wings. And there are other projects that are actually where you see major technological giants are investing in the CCS technology. They wouldn't have put their money behind these projects if they are not certain of the technology and also the commercial viability of it, and they're willing to pay this marginal green premium on top, which is actually, if you look at the bigger picture, it's not that big.
Yeah, I would also, draw, attention that there is in the US, there is this whole sub ecosystem around critical CO2, which is perhaps been overlooked. But critical CO2 you know, is a technology vector which kind of lends itself to solvent manufacturing. It lends itself to power generation, to using the alum cycle, for example. So, and there is private equity investment that is proceeding with these projects. So it's all happening still. Uh, but to answer your question, Tatiana, on the investment and up to 2030, in the next 5 to 10 years, what? I think one thing is for sure that now there is a relatively better policy stability environment regime, as Mohammed mentioned, in the US and in Europe and in the UK. So in these three geographies, I don't know much about Japan, but these three geographies we see some interest from patient capital. And where is the interest for that patient capital aligned? It is in the infrastructure. So now that infrastructure part, which requires that policy stability or long, loud policy signals, I think it is now emerging, and we begin to see a lot of that activity in the infrastructure space. If the infrastructure is built, the unit cost over a period of time will come down, as you would expect. So that is an area. Uh, when it comes to between now and 2035, I totally agree that there is even in the UK there is now recognition that there is no other alternative but to rely on next wave of gas coming into the UK. And it is in these areas where again the concentration levels and everything that we've discussed so far, that CCUS becomes more amenable to deploy. So I would say, cement, process chemical manufacturing, steel manufacturing, perhaps, um, and gas-based process industries. Those would be the areas where we will see, fairly rapid buildup of scale in as far as CCUS is concerned. I am convinced that the potential for biomethane, and at least in the European biomethane space, is there. The potential is proven. The scale up factor is very well known. But whether it will happen, there's a number of other projects competing for the same capital. So there we come to the reality as to what may or may not work. But I don't suppose in these sectors technology would be a showstopper for the deployment. That's my view.
Thank
Thank you.
There is one more question from our audience, which I think fits pretty well into this discussion of like 2030 time horizon. It's from Anna Serrano Anata. But why would manufacturing sectors such as cement companies prefer CCUS technologies over nature-based solutions, which could remove significantly larger amounts of CO2? Any thoughts?
I wouldn't say they are competing with each other. Nature-based solutions will probably continue what they're doing. But if you want to continue with the construction demand that you have, or just to build up the AI data centers, for example, you need that cement manufacturing. And if you need that cement manufacturing, you need to think of a way to how to produce that in the most sustainable manner. So I wouldn't they are not competing with each other, from a perspective of the potential for capture. Well, yes, but does that mean that you are going to have unabated cement production when there are competitors coming from places like India who are providing you carbon captured cement at perhaps the same price point? Then that would break the question. Yeah.
I agree, but let me add just a tiny bit to it. Absolutely, these solutions are all complementing each other and they don't compete at all. But we need to understand that some of the nature solutions are exposed to nature as we speak. With the climate change, that even becomes even more drastic and more challenging to implement these. Nature credit cards have been maxed out, and we need to exploit technologies that will enable us to capture the CO2 from the atmosphere. And CO2 is the most viable option, really, for deploying this.
Excellent.
Last year, our annual lecture, was on sustainable aviation fuels. The fuelers do an annual lecture, and there was this huge discussion around the circular nature and how biomass feedstock can feed into sustainable aviation fuel. I mean, the scale-up numbers are extremely challenging. I do not deny it, but does that mean that there are these things are not happening? No, there are projects happening in the UK which are moving in that direction. Right now, I think too early, but if as I say again, if you believe in net zero, you have to believe in CCUS. If you don't, then well, everything is up in the air.
Well, trust is a commodity that is not easily found. I think public trust remains a big challenge. We live in some of the most interesting times of our, at least my adult life. I'm sure it is for you as well. So in the in sort of discussing for this conversation, Tatiana and I were talking about public trust and perception and the kind of responses that we've seen on social media, especially on LinkedIn, on how this is such an issue of, as I'd like to say, put it Marmite, right? You either love it or you hate it. But what we were trying to do today is really to try and understand, okay, what does it take to make it successful? We need all of the above. What does it take to make successful? So, Tatiana, I know you had a burning question related to the public trust in mind, and if you're really serious about CCUS, as I let you ask, I guess, well, probably a last question. I think we've come to the end of our time as well. So please go ahead.
So basically, that was addressed already by our speakers. Yeah. How can the industry prove that CCUS isn't greenwashing, that it delivers verified net emission reductions, and that it does it at economically justified, efficient manner? Yeah, but I think generally, if you put together the whole discussion, I've got convinced already. But more, Ash, if you want to add something on top of that, it will be probably very useful for those who still have doubts and look suspiciously at this CCUS stuff.
Well, I'll only add that we're still at the beginning or the end of the beginning in this process, right? And as more and more data from these projects comes out in the open domain, I think that perception will change. There is a very valid reason for these concerns to still linger, because even the projects that are happening are still happening at a very early stage in their life cycle. Give it a few years, let the data speak for itself. I think you'll begin to see innovation in this space coming not necessarily from the policy created markets in the US, the UK, and Europe. You might actually begin to see it coming from China, where there is also a lot of experimentation and a lot of work going here. And if they have to you know if they have to continue to industrialize, particularly the emerging markets, then they will have to demonstrate that ability to be able to do so at a sustainable level. So I think that message, I think, has gone in the industry, and so we'll probably see some more of that, like we've seen the Indian cement example. We'll begin to see something like that in steel from China, or supercritical plants from China or India.
Excellent. Well, time flies, and we've really enjoyed this conversation. We could go on for another couple of hours easily, at least personally. I'm sure Tatiana will do too. But unfortunately, we must bring today's conversation to a temporary end. But the conversation does not have to stop here. Please continue to engage, and I'm sure you'll be very generous with your time in terms of answering some of the other questions that we may receive post this conversation. So today's conversation showed that CCUS is not a miracle or a mirage. I think, the answer is always somewhere in the sweet, sweet middle, like any good sandwich. So it works, but the scale, cost, and the credibility still define whether it matters. I want to personally, from my side, on behalf of Tatiana and the team, thank our wonderful speakers, Mohammed Hassan and Ashutosh Shastri, Mo and Ash, to us fondly. Thank you for sharing such grounded, nuanced insights. And to all of you, our guests and audience who've joined us live, thank you for those questions. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for making the time to join us. Tatiana?
Yeah, and I also wanted to thank the Worshipful company of fuelers who helped us to jointly organize this event. It's really a pleasure to cooperate with you, and we'll continue these
We will do some more.
conversations. Yeah,
Yes, we will
good
definitely do some
idea.
more.
Absolutely. So let's continue these balanced discussions, trying to view on like bipartisan manner these very complex issues, which sometimes create a lot of misunderstanding and even hate. Yeah, we want just to put together all the rational and the real arguments. So until then, until the next hour event, stay curious, stay critical, and stay focused on what truly moves the energy transition forward. Subscribe to our page on LinkedIn so that you don't miss notifications about our next events. On our website, you can subscribe to our newsletter. Again, in your email box, you will have the link to each of our events. Read our news, stay in touch, and thank you so much once again. And goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.